Today we're going to make a cold weather dish called pheasant Normandy. Now in France, this is a French dish. In France it would be called poulet à la normande or something like that if you can speak French better than me, but in French that means chicken. Poulet stands for chicken. I'm using pheasant because I have a friend that brought us some really great pheasant to work with, and you can make this dish with any kind of game bird, grouse or pheasant or chicken, and it is known for, Normandy is an area of France that's known for its apples, its apple cider, and its apple brandy, and all of those are used in the dish along with some onions and cream, and it is wonderful. So I'm Dorothy. Let's make this dish. It's very easy to make actually, but it does take some time. So it has to sit on the oven or on the stove top for 2.5 hours. So allow yourself some time, sit back, and let's get cooking. Okay, so briefly, here are the ingredients that you will need. You will need some apple cider, fresh pressed apple cider. You'll need some apple brandy. This is an inexpensive form of apple brandy. Calvados is the more authentic version of brandy. You'll need cream and butter, fresh butter. Apples, I use Granny Smith. You can use any kind of apple you want. An onion, some salt, some parsley, some thyme, a little Dijon mustard, and then of course the pheasant. Now, like I said earlier, you can use grouse or chicken. This is the pheasant. He brought it to me all dressed and all that. So I don't have any legs in here, so these are just pheasant breasts, and it's about 3 pounds. You'll need a little flour for dredging the pheasant in. As far as equipment goes, this is a Dutch oven, which because it's going to cook for 2.5 hours or so, you want something that it's not going to burn on the sides. Dutch ovens are great. You'll need a chef's knife, some tongs, and that's about it. So now to the stove. Before we go to the stove, a little salt on the pheasant will help bring out all the juices. Okay, so I put a couple tablespoons of butter into the Dutch oven and melted it. Then I'm going to put the apples in, and we're going to brown the apples. The thing that's important with the apples is to have them in a single layer. I use a lot of apples in mine because I like apples. I used 4 apples, so it's going to take 2 batches before I can get them all browned. Okay, so these apples, now that I turned them down and added more butter, these apples are browning up much more golden. You want them soft and golden and buttery, which is exactly what these are. When they're ready, we'll take them out, set them aside on a plate, and start doing the pheasant. Okay, so dredge the pheasant breasts lightly in flour, and then put them in the butter to sear. So I've got enough in there now. I'm going to sear these, take them out, and then sear the next batch. Okay, this is where you're going to use the tongs to turn them over with. When they're lightly brown like that, golden brown. Let them sear for a couple minutes on that side, take them out and put them in a plate and put the next batch in. I turned off the sound for a bit because the sizzling was getting really loud. So we're at the stage now where you're going to add the sliced onion. Make sure and caramelize these onions over medium heat for at least 5 minutes. There's nothing better than a caramelized onion. So this is looking pretty good. I've caramelized the onion, and now we're going to get all of that fond and goodness off the bottom by adding some brandy. There's the apple brandy, and you can see how it steams up and it takes all of that wonderful goodness off the bottom of the pot. So reduce this by about half. Next up is to add the apple cider. So 2 cups of apple cider into the pot, turn up the heat, and we're going to bring that to a boil. Okay, once the apple cider comes to a boil, then you want to add some thyme. You can put the whole sprigs in, or you can strip them like this. If you do put the whole sprigs in, you probably want to fish out the stems at the end because they don't taste great. After the thyme comes the pheasant breasts. Lay those in. Okay, so the pheasant Normandy has been simmering for a couple of hours now to get tender. Pheasant tends to be less tender than chicken. If you want to see if it's tender enough, you can poke a fork into it and see how it feels to you. I usually just go with a couple hours and that's good. So now it is time to take the pheasant out. Okay, pheasant is out. I'm going to add the apples. Mix them in. Turn up the heat to higher. Not all the way to high, but pretty high. And then reduce this by about half to make a nice syrupy, thick, wonderful cider brandy sauce. And then we'll add the cream at the end. Okay, once the sauce gets fairly reduced by half, about kind of syrupy, then I added the apples, cooked it down a little bit more, turned it up to high, and it should be getting to be a nice, thick, syrupy soup by now. It doesn't take very long, but you do want it at a higher heat. And now, I think it's where I want it, so let's turn off the heat and add the Dijon mustard and a half cup of cream. You don't want the heat off so the cream doesn't curdle. And then stir it all into a nice, creamy, buttery, rich sauce. And now you put the sauce into a bowl or some kind of serving dish and put the pheasant over it to serve. People do eat with their eyes, and it looks very visual this way, which I will show you in just a minute as we sit down for dinner. So how about a little toast with my family, minus the sun. And here's to cold weather, winter coziness.
Cheers.
Perfect. And now for the perfect pheasant meal. Okay, dig in. Not for you today. It's nice to have friends that bring you pheasant, but I think this would be just as good with chicken. What do you think?
No, you gotta have pheasant.
Pheasant?
Yeah, I think it would be fine with chicken.
How about with grouse? Do you think
Or
it?
duck.
Chicken,
Be a good
duck.
duck.
Is duck considered poultry? Yes.
Yeah, that's a serious question.
I guess I should have known that, but I didn't. Well, this is the wild game bird. I think it's great. What do you guys think?
Yep,
It's very good.
it's really good.
Happy winter.